How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest. She's a physical therapist, she's a strength coach, she's also the co-founder of Old Bull Athletics. Today, I am joined by the one and only Katie Dabrowski. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And what a nice intro. Thank you.
No problem at all. Yeah, I think the first question is, well, first of all, thanks a lot for taking time to jump on. But number two, how are you? What's kind of been happening in your world recently?
Yeah, all is well. I think for most of us in this world, like when we're busy, we're happy, but it's still a lot. So definitely in a very busy phase. The growth that we're experiencing at Old Bull Athletics, which is the kind of hybrid strength and rehab facility that we have in Miami. We actually have three locations, and we just opened our third location this year. So building that out and developing our team and onboarding new team members has been really the main kind of priority so far this year. And it's been awesome. I was just chatting with my business partner about this. I had this realization that the every person that we've brought on the team most recently, the most recent like four or five people, are all people who are not from Miami who found us and moved to Miami
Oh,
to
wow.
accept the job, which is just so cool because when we started, it really was just like, people kind of locally knew about us. So we got a lot of local people to apply and work with us. But the fact that we have people moving from different parts of the country is just like the coolest feeling. And we're attracting really just rock stars from all over the country. And the amount of gratitude I have for that is like overwhelming. We're busy, but in a really beautiful way. So that's kind of the main stuff going on right now.
Cool. I could kind of feel that excitement coming through from there, especially, if people are coming from, far and wide, which is cool. I know, obviously, speaking over email and we spoke briefly before we started recording, but in terms of your role of, onboarding new trainers, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I'll go with it. Part of my role was coach development, and sometimes that would be other coaches from other gyms who might have different thoughts, philosophies around training. Even though they've applied to work at that facility, they're going to have some buy-in of going there. Is that something that is a new role to you? Is that something that you've kind of been refining as you've been going, as Old Bull Athletics has been growing, or how have you kind of found that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the onboarding and kind of team development, it's always been there in some way as my role, but as we've grown, we're just getting better at it. Like I still to this day, the first two people that I ever hired are still with us and they're in leadership positions with us and they're just phenomenal. And I'm always like, hey guys, sorry for how everything was when you started because no formal onboarding, no systems, no processes, just kind of like sup guys, you ready? Just figuring it out as you go. And the fact of over the past 7 years how much we've developed systems, and not all from me by any means. We have incredible people on the team that we've elevated to leadership positions who are just phenomenal and really help big time, in addition to of course my business partner, but we have a director of operations as well. And just the things that we've been able to streamline and formalize and operationalize just look so different from how it all started. It's all an evolution and just making sure that people are experiencing the most kind of like seamless onboarding as possible, having everything really, really clear, having our roles really well defined. That's stuff that we're kind of constantly fine tuning, which is something that I don't think I realized I liked as much until I got into it more.
Yeah.
Because most of us, we start out as practitioners and not thinking that we're going to be running a business and having at this point, we have over 20 team members between the three locations and stuff that I would have never conceptualized happening. And I really like creating systems that people can kind of make their jobs easier with. And that's been an unexpected thing that I enjoyed much more than I thought I would, which is cool.
Nice. Yeah, maybe a little bit of a tangent there, but especially from, my own experience as well, I always like to get an idea of kind of like how you find it, and how you've worked with that. Um, I gave quite a brief introduction at the start, and it's kind of, mentioned now the position that you're in now. But for everyone listening who might not know your background in coaching, education, basically your journey to get to the point where you're at
Mhm.
now, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself, Katie.
Yeah, for sure. So I actually did not know I wanted to be a physical therapist. I all of my academic pursuits were centered around. I studied neuroscience, and I kind of always assumed I was going to get a neuroscience PhD. I was very into research and publication and kind of that side of the world. And I kind of just expected that's how my life was going to go. And I also was an athlete my whole life, and I've always been interested in sports, and I've always been interested in just movement in general. Rowing was my main sport, and I was lucky to be able to take that from high school and row in college. And just it was the phenomenal kind of setting the stage for all of the hard stuff that I do now. Nothing's harder than what I had to do for rowing, so that makes it really helpful. It really set the stage quite nicely. So I've always been interested in exercise, and I started lifting at 14. Like I just love training. And then I had kind of the typical injury with my last year in college rowing, went through physical therapy, things that you would think would have, like created this idea of like, oh, I think I want to do this. But I still was just kind of always thinking I was going to go the research route. And as I got more deep into the research route, I kind of realized um, I didn't want to just be in a lab, and I wanted to be around people more. And I kind of had this idea of, okay, what's a degree that I can get that kind of checks all the boxes of things that I care about. I want to be able to teach at a university. I want to be able to do research, and I want to be able to work with humans and not just like rats in a research lab. So that's where the pivot to physical therapy came, because since it's a doctoral degree, I can do all of those things. And it's crazy that I didn't think of it sooner, because it makes perfect sense with everything that I love. But the roundabout way that I got here, I'm really grateful for. So that's kind of the background professionally and how I became a PT. And I also knew when I was in PT school and doing internships that I didn't want to work for somebody, and I didn't want to do a traditional model. I knew that my background in strength and conditioning, and I had been a trainer for a long time all throughout school and through PT school. I knew that I wanted to blend the worlds more and to show people that the physical therapy is a lot more than laying on a table with a resistance band. So that kind of led me to starting my first practice as soon as I graduated at the gym that I was a trainer at during PT school. And it was kind of one of those moments where I was like, this just has to work or I can't pay rent. So we'll see what happens. And it worked. And I kind of just thought I was going to continue that way, like just being a solo practitioner based out of the gym that I was working at. And then I met my now business partner. And Frankie, my business partner, he started Old Bull in 2015. So I met him in 2019. And he is a phenomenal strength coach, exercise physiologist, background in football. And he was had Old Bull with a few friends who were trainers. And he was kind of like, I'm always referring out for physical therapy. It doesn't really make sense. Like, I'd love to talk more about maybe seeing if we could work together. And from that, it just blossomed into a fantastic business relationship. And since 2019, we've been working together and have then expanded to what we're doing now with the three total locations. So just a kind of roundabout way to get here, but I'm so happy with how it happened. So in addition to being with Old Bull, and helping our team develop and seeing patients. I teach undergrad university at the university that I went to undergrad at, actually in neuroscience, and I teach a lot of seminars. So I like to wear a few different hats and never stay anything other than insanely busy. That's what we do to ourselves.
Yeah, I think with that though, I think it's good, that especially number one, having kind of like a foot in both camps, because I think that it allows you to be able to be interested to hear your thoughts on this as well, and your experiences, to have that knowledge and kind of like see what's going on, but then also be able to actually speak to everyday people, athletes, and people coming in. Because the example that I always kind of go back to is, through the coaches and trainers that we had coming through where I worked back in the UK. Some of them were straight out of kind of university in strength and conditioning or anything like that, or sport and exercise science, sorry. Um, Loads of knowledge, but then couldn't actually kind of implement it or speak to people. Whereas on
Yeah.
the flip side, we had older trainers, coaches come who could speak to people. They could, coach exercises, but they just didn't have that extra little bit of knowledge which could have helped them out a little bit. Is that kind of what you've seen, experienced? What's kind of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think especially with the rise of like the evidence-based community, which I think is incredibly important. Obviously, like I'm a neuroscientist by trade. Like I love evidence, but I think there's a marriage of evidence and the science of coaching and the art of coaching and just knowing how to be a good communicator. And I think we can learn from both camps. And I think the people who maybe are straight out of school and don't have as much of the art side down, they're going to get there with experience for sure. But and then on the flip side, people with a ton of the art and the experience, of course, like could utilize a few more of the background evidence things to really bolster their argument of what they're doing. And absolutely, I mean, I love, as somebody who now hires people, like I love being able to meet people who fall all along that spectrum of like when they're out of school, kind of how long they've been doing this, what their background is. Like for us, our sweet spot, like I really love a physical therapist or a rehab provider who has a long background in coaching. I think that marriage is perfect. I think that is like the best outcome possible for our type of setting. And also, again, I think gives a little bit more of the art and science blended in one. If we only speak to people like they're a PubMed ID and talking only about the evidence, I think we lose a lot of the spark and the magic of what our profession is. But then conversely, if we only go by vibes and feelings, we can't necessarily impart the best intervention too. So I think it's a perfect combination of both that leads to the most success.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned it there, but that communication will come with experience, which is kind of a natural cycle progression that trainers, coaches need to go through. Because I always remember, and I've used this example before, but so when I came straight out of university and I was coaching, I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this. I want to talk about that,
Yeah.
and I'm going to explain everything. And one of my very first clients, he was an ex-professional rugby player. And
Mm,
especially, yeah, if you've ever been to Yorkshire, it's quite kind of like straight talking, no nonsense. And he was just like, yeah, like what we're doing today. Like, forget telling me about
yeah.
that. Like, what's the actual session? And I'm like, yeah, fair enough. And then
Fair
you
enough.
refine it, you refine it a little bit as you go. One thing that you said there is as well, being a communicator as a coach and kind of going into the first topic that I sent over or to chat about and I've heard you speak on this before, content that you've shared on this before, and speaking to kind of like general population and how you would communicate that as a coach is going to the gym, training, working out is I can't remember the phrase of it, but that's kind of like free healthcare, in terms of being able to move better, feel better, look better, and also, you've spoken about how that has an impact on metabolic health as well. So I just kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on, how do you go about explaining, communicating that to clients? How do you get your trainers and coaches to be like, look, we want to partner that gym with this is going to be of benefit because sometimes, especially for general population, they might not want to go. They might not want to go to the gym. They might find it a little bit of a struggle to start, and then also tying into how can that impact metabolic health and what that actually is. I realize that's quite a big, quite a broad question there, but
No,
does that
that's
kind of make
perfect.
sense? Yeah.
Yeah, no, these are my favorite topics ever, so it's totally fine. And they're very linked. Yeah, absolutely. I think, communicating to clients is something that is another one of those things that I kind of realized over time I just genuinely love. And I really am interested in continuing my evolution and our team's evolution of just getting more and more skilled at it. And kind of like what you were alluding to, where, we're such nerds about this stuff that we chose it to be our profession. And we have to remember that like most people who come to see us do not feel that way about training and exercise. So my knee jerk reaction to explain everything and to like just blow people's minds, it's not necessarily what's going to happen because they are not people who literally chose this. Like most people don't like exercise, and we like it so much that we made it our career. And I talk to my team about this a lot, that we have to remember that, and we have to keep that lens when we're talking to people about what we're doing, because a lot of the stuff that we get excited for can kind of fall on deaf ears if it's not something that people are as passionate about, or quite frankly, if there's somebody in pain, something they're scared of. A lot of people come to us with preconceived notions of how dangerous exercise is, or a certain movement they should not do, or, oh, I had a disc herniation 20 years ago and my doctor told me to never bend over again. And a lot of the things that we are encountering are kind of having to unwrite those narratives. But we have to do it in a way that is respectful of where people come from, that is acknowledging the fact that, again, we find this stuff fascinating and interesting and empowering, but not everybody does. And that people's confidence in their ability to move and exercise is going to be a way bigger predictor of how I'm going to intervene than just of like what I think that they need. Like I can think that of the perfect training program that somebody needs, but if they're terrified to do it, it doesn't matter. So that's really where this becomes extra challenging and tricky. And how we communicate this stuff for sure might look different for every single person. And I kind of used to think of it from a perspective of like, I wanted to give people an aha moment the first time they saw me. I wanted to blow their minds with what I was going to tell them and show them. And again, sometimes people who are really deconditioned, who are scared of exercise, who feel uncomfortable training because they're not really maybe happy with their bodies, or they have pain that makes it scary to exercise, I'm probably not going to try to blow their mind day one. I'm probably just going to try to hear where they're coming from, meet them where they're at, and over time create an experience that maybe starts to show them that exercise is fun and safe instead of telling them about it. So I'm getting better at this constantly. But my when I'm speaking kind of with the general population about the importance of training for long-term healthcare, for their metabolic health, I'm probably going to slow drip it a little bit more than maybe I used to. And that first day, I really just want to be able to create a space for them where they feel like they can share their story that maybe they haven't been able to before. And instead of maybe immediately trying to interject and say, like, oh, well, that's actually not how it works. We're going to move a lot and that's going to make you feel better. I want to do it in a way that feels really comfortable to them. And I think that's something that as coaches, is the skill we can continue to refine. Because again, we're coming from a place of wanting to help so badly that I think we often just want to like throw everything at somebody and blow their mind with the stuff that we're telling them. And over the years, I've found that if I can create an experience with exercise and movement that maybe violates the expectation they had with it, instead of tell them that I'm going to change their mind, that's going to actually go a lot further. So I kind of keep it really relaxed, and I just frame it like, I want to learn more about you. I want to learn about the things that you really want to get back to. And then part of my job is to find a really safe place to start doing that today. And sometimes that's it. And I might not take a deep dive into those more complex topics just yet, and slow drip it over time so it doesn't feel like I'm yet another provider telling them all of the things that are wrong with them, giving them a laundry list of things they suck at, and then telling them how I'm going to make them basically change their entire day to day life to get better. That's super overwhelming. So that's how I start usually. And then over time, as we get more comfortable with each other, those conversations can start to happen a little bit more. Like, man, you know what's really interesting? The more active we are and the more muscle mass that we have, there's some pretty big predictors of what that looks like for our long term health. So, in addition to helping you maybe decrease your pain, one of my big kind of background goals is helping you get as fit as possible, because there's so much overlap in your long term health with how fit we are. And so that's going to be stuff that's kind of always going on in the background, while I'm also making sure we address the really specific things you came in with today. And I think sometimes like less is more. Sometimes we can overdo it. Sometimes we can want to create like a masterclass for our clients on these topics, but sometimes the buy-in for this stuff, less is more than overdoing the explanation.
Yeah, there's quite a couple of things as I was nodding along as you were speaking there. It goes back to what we were just chatting about at the start about that combining that art of coaching and the knowledge side of things. Do you think that sometimes when clients have those barriers up, you've mentioned there, they've been told that this is wrong with them. They've used it's an entire book worth of technical jargon of like this is what's up with you. Actually, they're just lacking a little bit of mobility here, here, and here. Like
Right.
we can sort that out, but I think with anything you can overlook, complicate anything and I literally had a conversation on Monday with a new PT client. She actually used the word sinister. Like it comes across a lot more sinister than what it actually is.
Totally.
And because from, a keyword that you said as well was like it's an experience. So their experience before of we're going to do this and we're going to do this, and coaches, therapists speaking at them, as opposed to actually listening. Just kind of I've completely lost the word. Trying to like diffuse it and be like,
Yeah.
"Look, you tell me." And do you think then that opens up more avenues to be like, let's try this, let's give this a go? What's kind of your thoughts on that?
100%. And that's why too, it's also just my personality, so I can't shut it off, but I'm weird and goofy, and like I think that kind of can help diffuse some things too. Like I don't want people to have that white coat syndrome of like we're very buttoned up and everything has to be perfect. And the language I use also reflects that. Like I'm very conscious and mindful of the language that I'm using where I talk about it. We're going to explore movement today. We're going to find an entry point for things that maybe don't feel great, but we're going to find something today that feels like you can tolerate it. And making it more about exploration instead of this very black and white, you did this wrong, so now we have to do this right. That's why you got hurt. That's why you have a problem. That's why you have pain. And kind of creating more of the atmosphere of there's a million ways to do this. We're going to explore and find things that truly feel best for you that align back with the goals that you came in here with. So absolutely, I think I like that you use the word diffusing because I completely agree with you. I think most people, and when they're consumers of healthcare, they're used to just being told what is wrong and then like the litany of things to do to fix it. And we're trying to create a very different experience at Old Bull that you coming to us is awesome actually because you're opening the window to helping us also just make you healthier. And like the reason you came in today about this pain you're experiencing, we're going to address that, but we're also going to do so many things that are exploratory and kind of open your eyes to different ways of exercise and movement that you might not have tried before to help you stay healthy while we're also dealing with what we're dealing with. And I think if we just kind of decrease like how serious this is all of the time, I think that helps a ton. And it's not to say that I want to be dismissive and flippant and just so silly that nothing matters, but most people when they experience pain, they're already thinking very seriously about it and it sucks and it's not fun and I don't want to add to that. I want to show them that exercise can be fun, that being in our facility can be fun, and that we can explore a bit. And I always tell people as well, my number one job is to keep people safe. So every single time they're in a session with me, whether it's our evaluation or our 500th session together, I'm constantly going through my mental checklist of, is there anything present today that would warrant a second opinion? That is a red flag, that would require me to refer out, that would require me to change our plan today based on safety. And I want to make that really clear to my clients too, because our exploration can maybe look like we're just throwing something on the wall and seeing what sticks. But it's actually very calculated that we've ruled out red flags and sinister stuff or scary stuff, which means that we are very confident that we are safe to explore movement. And I think that's another thing that we have to help people understand, that the absence of scary red flags, like once we find that out, we're really safe to move. Like exercise is super safe. And I think when we can make that more clear, what we're doing also becomes more of an exploration and people can have more of the buy-in for that too. So that's again the art and the science. I'm using the evidence to really rule out the red flags and the stuff that would dictate how I maybe change my treatment that day or refer out or consult with another provider. And then otherwise, like we're safe. So we got to just find stuff that you like, that feels like related to your goal, that maybe helps you regain components of your identity that you felt have been lost because of your pain. And that's hard enough to create a stimulus or a change. If I'm doing all that stuff, oh my God, that can look dramatically different from one client to the next, but it's done methodically still to rule out scary stuff to then be able to do things that help people and that are totally safe to do.
Yeah, I think it's focusing on what they can do rather than always being told, no, no, you can't do this. You know, you used an example before of, yeah, actually, you can't pick up anything off the floor. All right, so if you drop your
Yeah.
phone on the floor, that's it. You have no phone
Yep.
now. It's it, it's gone. And as well, another thing that I like there is, yeah, I think there's always a time and a place for a certain level of. I don't always use the phrase like seriousness, but just concentration.
Hmm.
Again, another example in a session today, would increase the weight on his back squat, a weight that he hadn't done before. We were going for 5 reps. All I need you to do is concentrate. It's going to take you what, less than a minute to do 5 reps. Just concentrate for this minute. Afterwards, we can then
Hmm.
talk about, are you going to the beach this weekend? What are you doing? Whatever.
Yeah.
Just concentrate for that. But I am a big believer in yeah. I always say, hopefully you'll know what daftness means. Just like
Yeah.
a little bit of daftness goes a long way. This might be another tangent,
Agreed.
but one thing you said there a little bit earlier was things can be categorized as like right or wrong. And it's a case of, nope, you've done this wrong. So we need to stay on this until you get it right. And it's kind of, yeah, you can't move forward. Whereas everybody needs to feel as though they're progressing or just feeling more comfortable in that environment. Whereas nobody likes being told that they're doing something wrong because it's kind of like
Hmm.
you're either going to feel as though you've failed or you're going to feel as though you're getting told off. And there might not be an answer to this, but um, where do you think that kind of like right and wrong comes from, rather than that curiosity to explore a little bit? Is it coming more from kind of again, you touched on it there, kind of that white coat clinical background of it's very black and white because that's what the numbers say, that's what the research says, so this is wrong, rather than maybe on the exploring side, again, that's maybe like the art of coaching where it's a little bit like, all right, we're not there, but if we just change this and change this a little bit, where do you think that right and wrong comes from? And why do you think so many, more so kind of like general population, but it might be with athletes as well, get so hung up on right or wrong, and I need to get this right, I need to do this, or
Yeah.
they have preconceived ideas of. The example that I would use is I use the trap bar quite a lot for deadlifting.
Hmm.
I've a background to myself. When I stopped playing as much rugby, I competed in powerlifting. Obviously, use a straight
Hmm.
bar. That's what people see all the time. And people are like, well, when do I use a proper bar? And I'm like, well, you're actually really strong on the trap bar. Like, it's not going to injure you. Like, it's fine. You're not doing
Yeah.
anything wrong. It's not as though I'm holding you back. But yeah, 100% we can go into the straight bar. It's just different as opposed to
Different.
right or wrong. What's kind of your thoughts on that whole segment that I just said there?
Yeah, I really like the way that you framed that. I think there's a few things that contribute to maybe why there's almost like an obsession with I need to know if I'm doing it right or wrong because I did it wrong, so that's why I got hurt, right? Like that's usually how people feel. I think a few components of that. I think in traditional healthcare, in a much more like biomedical model where you do tests and you find what the values are and you compare to normative values. And then if they're not in those, then there's something in quotations wrong and you fix it with a very specific plan. That's very different from how movement and musculoskeletal injury works. Because there's not really normative movements or normative values because of the just vast human variability. Like our anatomy being as different as it is, our squats are going to look different, our deadlifts are going to look different, our overhead presses are going to look different. Every single thing that you and I do, you could never compare because we're two different bodies. That's not even taking into consideration the sports that we have backgrounds in. So the pre kind of determined ways that we move based on what we've trained for our whole lives, what our genetic influences tell us about how we might move and the ways that we seek out activity, what injuries we've had in the past that might change how we move or change the way that we think about things, our past experiences with pain that will absolutely dictate how we move. Our goal activity that we're trying to get to will dictate how we move. So there's not that black and white way, but Oh my gosh, do physios try to find one? I think for a few reasons. I think to normalize the chaos of everything I just explained, to try to find structure in something that doesn't really have it. I don't think people are as comfortable with saying we don't know or there's a lot of ways to do this versus this is right or wrong. So I think there's a little bit of the illusion of control or the illusion of competency that comes in with wanting to have a right or wrong answer. I think a little bit of it is to defend all of the schooling and the money that we paid, because truly, if you're a really excellent coach and a really excellent physio, I don't think there's that much of a difference. But I think if you want to defend the degree that you got and the money that it took to get there, you're going to find things to show that you're different from some other type of profession. So I think there's a little bit of an ego and identity crisis in that respect. And then I also think that most people who are consumers of healthcare are looking for a specific answer. So a lot of physios will try to give one. And so all of that, I think it comes from a well-intentioned place, but it's actually not really backed in a ton of evidence because of the amount of variability that we have. I also think that there for a very long time, and it's still happening in curriculums everywhere for trainers, coaches, and rehab providers. There's been an over medicalization or an over like pathologizing of movement to say that biomechanics matter a lot more than they do. And I think that's a really big thing. Like what we are taught in school is very mechanically driven for how injuries happen instead of the many, many instances when there is not a specific event, yet somebody still has pain. And just that, the fact that that exists kind of negates the argument in itself that all pain is linked back to some sort of biomechanics or movement. So I think when it comes to right versus wrong, I think we have to adjust our way of thinking of optimal for the goal and the human versus not. And like what you were saying with straight bar versus trap bar, if somebody feels better and stronger with a trap bar, that's going to be a better movement for them. Is it right? No. Is it wrong? No. It is better for them. If somebody feels really uncomfortable with straight bar deadlifting and they can only do like 10 kilos each side versus the trap bar, they basically have no limit and feel really good with. If I need to impose a better training stimulus, I'm going to give them the trap bar any day over
Yeah.
trying to do something that maybe we're told is right. So that's a huge part of it as well. I also think too, when it comes to form, we really and being right or wrong with movement, we have to link it back to their goal activity and we have to link it back to the target tissue we care about impacting. If somebody needs to build up more strength and tolerance of their back muscles and their glute muscles, then maybe a conventional deadlift is better for them because they're going to be more hingy, because they're going to challenge those muscles more versus the trap bar where they can be more upright, they can use their quads more, they're not going to be as hingy and load those posterior structures more. And that's again not right or wrong, but if their target tissue is back extensors and glutes, that's going to dictate the exercise I pick for them. So it's much more nuanced than right or wrong, but I think most people are uncomfortable with nuance and want to just have an answer. Like I get that too, but I think we have to be a little bit more careful in how we give that answer.
Yeah, when you mentioned there about biomechanics, I was nodding along because I really enjoyed biomechanics at university, especially with
Yeah,
like powerlifting as well. It was kind of like, yeah, like this 100% makes sense. But then you kind of forget about the individual that you're looking at. You know, you mentioned there in terms of, you know, our if we were doing a squat, and forgetting about that person in front of you and trying to fit them into um, uh, this is how it should be. Whereas actually, oh no, like how, like, you know, the speaking, being able to communicate. How does that feel? What happens if we just put our feet a little bit wider? What happens if we do that?
hmm,
And luckily, that was how I learn from the knowledge that I got from university, but learning on the gym floor with other trainers and coaches who had been doing it a lot longer than me, and to be like, well, actually, you know, you can see that isn't working. Why not try? Why not change it around? And when you say about doing
totally.
things that are that feel comfortable or feel good, I trained him for just over 2 years. Really cool guy, absolutely love training him. And he used to come in and he used to do kind of like this really random stretch on a gym ball, on a Swiss ball. And I was like, what is that like? Honestly, he'd spend a couple of minutes doing it, and I was like, why? And I just went to him. I was like, why? No, he said, should I be doing this? Is this helpful? And I literally, because he always used to train first thing in the morning, and I was just like, he was called Simon. And I said, look, does that feel good? Does it make you feel ready to exercise? And he was like, yeah, it does actually. I went, let's just keep doing that then. And
Yep,
sometimes I know, obviously, you spoke about a lot of things, and in terms of like, injury, adjusting things, looking for red flags, that level of like seriousness or concentration. But sometimes I also think as well, it's kind of like picking your battles and going back to what we
totally.
said right at the start about that exploration, making people confident, actually making them, giving them an experience. Like I would make him a coffee. We had a coffee machine in the gym. We would
Yep.
both get a coffee. He'd do whatever he was doing on the gym ball, and then we'd train. And we'd have a really good session. He'd feel good. He'd feel as though he'd kind of like loosened up a little bit. He was in
Yeah.
his 40s. Had done quite a lot of. He was actually, which was really interesting for me. He was an endurance athlete. He'd actually cycled
Mm.
around Ireland, done some really cool challenges, and it just made him feel good. All right, cool.
Oh,
Let's just go
yeah,
from
that's
there.
a win.
The actual
Yeah.
benefits of what he was doing, I was a bit like, yeah, I don't really know, but it made him feel good. Um,
And that's being a really good coach. Like at the end of the day, there was something I talk about a lot. In the United States of America, fewer than 25% of our population meet the bare minimum requirements of what we would determine to be enough exercise to be healthy. So it's 150 minutes of aerobic activity per week in whatever way you break it up, and 2 sessions of strength training each week. If the vast majority of our population doesn't meet that, how dare I add another barrier to exercise by saying that movement is stupid? It does nothing. This is how we're going to warm up. Like, who cares? If it's
yeah,
not dangerous, keep doing it. And again, that's stuff that I've evolved on for sure, right? Because when we come out of school, we know the right answer to everything. And anything that isn't 100% my idea is bad. And like, that's kind of the evolution we go through. But I think what you just expressed is being a phenomenal coach, meeting the person where they're at, making sure they're feeling good and enjoying their session. And he just got a great workout. Who cares if it's some crazy Bosu ball or Swiss ball exercise? It's not dangerous. Doesn't matter. He likes it. And that's what's going to keep somebody motivated to continue exercising. If we add all of these extra parameters and barriers and all of these things, we already have an epidemic of obesity, of diabetes, of metabolic syndrome. How dare I add another barrier that makes it just that much harder for somebody to get in the gym? Like that's the level of seriousness I feel about it. Like we're adding so much complexity to something that doesn't have to be as complex as we're making it out to be.
yeah, definitely. I appreciate the compliment there on coaching. So I might give that exercise to more people if they but it kind of brings us it flows quite nicely to back on topic what we were talking about from the first question there of, and you've said there, adding something in that is another barrier. And when we're talking about health, when we're talking about, you mentioned a little bit earlier, your level of fitness can help with your health, long term health as well, improve health markers. But there is going to be a level of avoidance, and it could be a case of, I think it can work both ways. People are okay doing bodyweight exercises, but they don't want to add in any weighted exercises. People are quite happy doing strength training circuits, but they don't want to actually do any cardio or level of fitness. And I suppose, how do you kind of break that down, that avoidance? Because again, they could have had a poor experience of it. They might not enjoy it. There might not actually be. And this is something that I can 100% relate to. I've uh, done a lot more cardio than I have done over the last couple of years. Not playing as much rugby, which would be my cardio. Just kind of went full on into powerlifting. You don't need a lot of cardio for powerlifting. However,
Yeah.
just having that level of fitness now, I'm lighter than what I was, but I can recover more and I can still do not, when I was competing a lot more, but I'm still there or thereabouts in terms of strength levels and hoping to, push that a little bit more. But sometimes it is that avoidance of, right, well, I do this. But sometimes people are worried that they're not going to be able to hit that marker. So they're like, oh, if I don't do
Hmm.
it, no one's really going to pull me up on it because, I'll just be told I'm doing something wrong anyway. So yeah, how do you kind of combat that avoidance and get across to people that, just increasing that base level of fitness isn't just being able to run a 5K, but also actually has much more benefits for your life health
Hmm.
markers in the long term as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple things, like I kind of first and foremost care the most that somebody does have a mode of exercise that they like and that they're already doing. And even if it's something that I'm like, okay, well, we need to do a few other things, I want to first establish that. So maybe it is somebody who's a runner and they just love to run, but we know they need strength training too. I want to highlight the fact that they like running, they found something they enjoy. And then I also want to frame to them the importance of other types of exercise to complement their main activity. And for a lot of people, like especially a runner who's just obsessed with running, if I make strength training about it making them a better runner, instead of even maybe talking about the health benefits, that might be more of a sticking point for them. Like for that person, that might work. Or same with a power lifter. Like trying to convince powerlifters that they need cardio is challenging. But if I frame it a bit more of like, well, actually, what's really cool about developing your aerobic system is you can actually like physiologically recover better from really hard lifts. Like that's what your recovery is based off of. So that's a huge benefit to be able to actually recover in real time faster to be able to get more sets in or be able to push your weights more. And maybe that's the connector for them that matter the most. Because most powerlifters don't care as much about their big picture health metrics. They care about their meat. And they understand that lifting and kind of only focusing on lifting is leaving some other stuff on the table, but it's their sport and it's what they love. So I need to be really mindful of that too. So that's kind of one part of it. Like if I can tie it back to what they like to do, that's huge. What I'll often say to people as well, like a runner I work with right now, for example, we're introducing strength training to complement her running and decreasing her overall running volume. But I have to be careful in how I say that to her because a runner who's obsessed with running, all they hear is that I'm stopping them from running as much and giving them something else to do that they don't like. So I have to be really careful in how I frame these things and lean more into we're going to optimize your running by cutting down your volume a little bit so you can recover better and have way more successful runs. And then I'm going to give you like the biggest bang for your buck things that you need to do in the gym to also make your running better. I'm not going to give you more than you need. I'm going to give you just of what you need. And that also might help with people too, instead of maybe opening the conversation up to something bigger. So that's kind of one side of it. And then another side of it that I'll explain to people if maybe they're like, yeah, I'm here for my knee pain. Why are you talking to me about cardio or why are you talking to me about my biceps or other stuff? I always explain to people that my job is to, yes, work on the thing that you kind of came in here with, but it's also to make you as healthy as a human as possible. So for every human being, I want them to be able to express these qualities in some way. I want them to have strength. I want them to have muscle mass. I want them to have explosive power. I want them to have endurance. And I want them to have like athleticism in some way. So, however that looks for you might be different, but our goal in working together is to start to level up these other qualities so you can also just be like a really healthy human. And that might be enough for people too.
Yeah. The and you mentioned this a couple of times throughout them we've spoken there, being that as a human, as a healthy human as well, and kind of tapping into the powerlifting side of things. I think sometimes people can go right down the route of I'm a powerlifter, I'm a runner, and it's kind of like I'm only going to do this. Whereas actually, there's this big thing over here where, you do need, obviously, it's dependent on how much power, how much strength you need. Not everybody needs to be able to, lift double body weight on deadlift or be able to, run at a certain speed. But it's good to have those qualities so that
Hmm.
if, for example, again, use myself as an example, not competing as much in powerlifting, but if I wanted to do jumping, which I have done to fair, jumping some of the classes,
Mhm.
in Thailand. All right, cool. So I can be able to do that. So it gives a couple of options as opposed to, again tying it into injuries. All right, so I can't actually squat because I've got an injury on my knee. All right, but I can do this. It gives more options to be able to do things outside of that identity, if you like, of
Yeah.
what the focus on. Do you kind of agree with that?
For sure. And yeah, like I think too, even just feeling capable in your day-to-day life to be able to do whatever activity kind of presents itself, I think is a quality that people maybe don't even realize they want until they don't feel like they have it. Like you go travel and suddenly you have a 20,000 step day that you don't typically have. And to not feel like you can do that, yet you can go into the gym and squat a ton of weight, that can be very concerning to people. So I also think kind of framing it in that way too, of like, I want to just help people feel really capable for whatever life throws at them. And that's another goal that we have in conjunction with maybe a performance goal that they have in a specific lift or a specific sport or a rehab goal that they have. I also just want to increase your capability of your day to day life. I want you to take that trip and somebody be like, hey, you want to go on this hike? And you be able to. Is it going to feel perfect if you don't always hike? No, but I want you to feel like your body and your tissues have the capacity to do it. And I think that's um, a part of rehab that's not really focused on as much because it's very zoomed in on like the tissue pathology that somebody comes in with instead of the capability of them as a human as a whole. So spot on. And while also, of course, being respectful of if somebody does have a main mode of exercise or sport that they need to be more proficient at compared to other domains, I need to be respectful of that too. If I have a power lifter who has a competition in 6 months, yet I also want to improve their aerobic system, am I making them run a ton of mileage that would detract from their training volume that they can tolerate for their meet that matters more than me wanting to just beef up their cardiovascular system? No. I'm going to find the minimum effective dose. I'm going to find a way to integrate things that do not compete with the demands that are required for their sport. And I think that's an important thing too of making sure that we're actually appropriately dosing things for people who have other goals. Like I train in a way where almost all of my goals compete with each other. I want to be really strong and muscular, but I want to be fast and be able to sprint, but I also want to be able to run like a 6 hour trail race. Those on paper are entirely competing domains, but they're all important to me. So I need to figure out a way to titrate my dosage of them to be appropriate so I don't overtrain, but I also don't not train the domains enough to make a change. So that's where like the science and art comes back in. And that's where my frustration as a physio comes in because I see such a oh, did that cut out? Are we good?
No, no, all good.
Okay. Because I froze for a second, so I want to
Oh.
make sure. Because one of my biggest frustrations as a physio is that there seems to be just this complete lack of understanding of programming and periodization. Because it's like that's stuff that strength coaches do. And it's like, well, that's exactly what we need to be doing as well. Because if people have these different goals, I need to dose them appropriately.
Yeah.
And most pain and injury is from some sort of issue of dosage when there hasn't been like a specific event that occurred. If you didn't get ran into by an athlete on a field or hit by a truck or have an accident, most people's pain and injury is because there was some sort of mismatch of the dosage of what their training was or lack of training compared to the thing they just asked their body to do. So that's why I get so frustrated as well because the dosage is what matters the most. Yet I would argue that is the area that physios are the least qualified to discuss and work on with people. So this is something that I think is just like inextricably linked to how we need to rehab people, and why I think things can go awry if we're not focusing on dosage too. So that was a little bit of a tangent and a frustration of the industry at whole, but that is a passion point of mine for sure.
Yeah, no, I'm a big believer in that. I think having that structure around it and having that plan is important. And I think it's a Dan John quote where it's like keep the goal. But then in my brain, how it works behind there is like a little bit like a sound system for like a DJ. Some goes up a little bit, some
Yes.
down a little bit. But it's kind of um yeah, what do you need to do to keep to keep doing that, and just having that sprinkling in of, yes, we want to be able to do this, but we're just going to have a really low dosage of that, rather than trying to trying to cram everything in on there. And
Yeah.
yeah, that when you're having from a physio side of thing as well, having that structure in terms of the program, that is important, because I think sometimes as default it can be a case of, all right, well actually we'll just take everything away and then put them in a different position, whereas actually we can still keep this here. We just need to drop that down a little bit again. Those kind of like dials on the board again. Quite a lot of topics, tangents thrown in there, Katie, but really, really enjoyed the chat today. The last question that I like to ask, from everything that we've spoken about there, for everyone listening, whether it's the coaches out there, physios, Gen Pop, lifters listening, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Oh, great question. Um, yeah, I think this applies to everybody kind of in the group that you just mentioned. Like finding ways to move and be active in ways that kind of tie back to your identity and you enjoy, and also like as a third win, just help improve your general health. Like that's really the goal here. And I think as practitioners, we need to keep that in mind with exercise selection and things that we're working on with people, and maybe focus less on convincing people to do things a certain way, but instead finding things that align with their identity, but also help the goals that you as a practitioner have for them is incredibly important. And then from like the Gen Pop perspective, I think we don't have to take it so seriously all of the time in terms of selecting the perfect exercise or the perfect mode of training, and being well-rounded, exploring and finding things that you genuinely enjoy doing is going to matter the most, because consistency with training is what moves the needle more than anything else. So if you find something you like that you're going to be consistent with, hold on to that. That's a really good thing. And then maybe explore some other options in addition to that, but find the thing that gets you super excited and keep doing it forever as long as you love it, and keep exploring and know that like there isn't one way to do all of this. And hopefully that's empowering instead of overwhelming, and to see the kind of limitless options as a practitioner and as a consumer of healthcare as a great opportunity to explore, instead of maybe feeling like worried about all of the options, feeling confusing. Like use it as something that's empowering, because we can't really go wrong. Like we have a lot of leeway and ways to help people, and you have a lot of leeway and ways to move and be active to improve your health.
Yeah, I thought that was a good wrap up there, and the key word that you said was empowering. I know sometimes choice can be overwhelming. The example that I always use is just look at all of the TV options. You've got Netflix, Amazon, Paramount. Like it's overwhelming,
Yes.
and sometimes it's like, oh no, I don't know what to do. Whereas when it comes to health and fitness, there is a lot of choice, but if you do something, you don't have to stick with that forever. It's
Yeah.
going back to kind of like the powerlifting and the strength side of things. People think that, I'm just going to make them do powerlifting all the time. No, do you want to do strength training? How much strength training do you want to do? A little bit. I enjoy doing this. Cool. Let's just go with that, because exactly like what you said, if you're consistent with it, something good is going to happen. You're going to get healthier. You're going to get stronger. It's just kind of that investment in time that's gonna allow you to get there. So yeah, I thought that was a really good point to finish on there. If anyone has any questions about what we've spoken about today, want to reach out to you, or see the content that you share, where could people find you, Katie?
Instagram is the best place. So my personal Instagram, KT Dabrowski, or our gym's Instagram, Old Bull Athletics. Those are fantastic places. Anything that we're doing in terms of continuing education, courses, online stuff, or just putting out our own educational content is all there. So that is a great place to reach out if anybody needs anything.
Awesome. Well, thanks a lot, Katie, for taking the time to jump on today. Really, really enjoy chatting with you. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will catch you all at the next episode.